Hello, my All Souls family. Thank you so much for tuning in. Special thank you to the All Souls Con team for putting on this convention so we can come together virtually at the intersection of science, magic, history, philosophy, and culture. I am so excited to have the opportunity to talk to you today about herbalism, the medicine and magic of all souls. So, some objectives today for our journey. We'll start out with some basic background and foundation, looking at the essentials of herbal medicine and herbal magic. And then we'll take a little peek into the historical and cultural context of herbalism. Then we'll take a journey through the All Souls universe, and we'll dive into some of the herbs of all souls, such as Marthe's tea, the dream pillows, the little 16th century headache coddle, and some remedies mentioned in Times Convert. And then we'll conclude with learning how herbalists write formulas and why I believe there is just a little touch of alchemy to it. And I'll send you off with some lovely tisane recipes for self-care. So a quick little bit about me. My name is Andrea Helton. I have a master's degree in acupuncture and herbal medicine, and I have been a clinician for about 8 years. In my personal life, I do practice an earth-based spirituality, and because of that, I really look at my role in life as kind of helping to create a bridge between science and spirit. Obviously, an avid fan of All Souls, these books have made such a huge impact on me, both personally and professionally. Before we really get going, I just kind of have the obligatory disclaimer. So any herbs that we mention today for various conditions should not be used unless under the guidance of a clinical herbalist. So let's start with what medicinal herbalism is. We define it as the therapeutic use of botanicals and other natural materia for health promotion and disease management. It can be used either as a standalone treatment, but more often in conjunction with conventional medicine. Herbs can be administered as tisanes, which is like an herbal tea, tinctures or extracts, like ointments and oils or capsules. They can be burned or diffused as aroma. My preferred method is to use herbal decoctions, which is essentially a really heavily cooked herbal tisane. I will usually select between 10 and 12 herbs. You can see some behind me, but I usually keep about 200 at home in one of our guest rooms. We have a huge apothecary in our house. And I will throw them all into this big herb pot, which is this guy right here, and then fill it with water and bring it to a boil, and then just let it cook for about 90 minutes, and then strain it and drink it. As you can see, it's a nice dark cloudy mixture. The taste isn't terrible. It's kind of like a bitter black tea, but sometimes you can add certain additives to make the flavor a little bit more palatable. But I really like this method because it really allows me to customize formulas, and then the longer cooking allows me to draw out the kind of optimal healing properties from the herbs. So using herbs can be very powerful, but it does require a formal education to be done effectively and safely, especially when you take herb-drug interactions into consideration. So for my training specifically, I have kind of a weird master's course. It's a bit longer. So it's a 4-year master's. It's about 3,500 hours of education. It covers Eastern medicine, so like the acupuncture and herbs, as well as anatomy, physiology, general and systemic pathology, pharmacology, differential diagnosis, and then we have about a 1,000-hour residency we have to complete. Unfortunately, in the United States, the practice of herbal medicine is not really standardized or licensed, which means there is a lot of snake oil out there. A little fun story about snake oil. So it actually comes from a legitimate anti-inflammatory oil that used to be used by Chinese laborers to ease aches and pains. Of course, though, this oil was eventually co-opted, manipulated, and peddled, so now we associate the term with pseudoscience. This lack of standardization, though, and regulation to me is a little bit unfortunate. Herbal medicine really can be a powerful adjunct in healthcare, but its optimal use does demand regulation. Thankfully, though, the body of research on herbalism is continually growing, which may mean a more stable place for herbalism in mainstream medicine. So how do we explain what an herb does for healing? So many herbal texts will categorize herbs based on their botanical pharmacology and function. So herbs are listed as being like an antispasmodic or antiviral or anti-inflammatory and the like. In Chinese medicine, though, herbs are categorized based on their function and their inherent nature. So first, herbs are categorized by their primary function. For example, one category is called herbs that move chi. So chi is often kind of synonymous with energy, but it's not a magical substance. Chi is more of a shorthand term that we use to refer to kind of the collective biological and physiological processes in the body, such as, creating ATP, gut motility and digestion, circulation, nerve synapses or contractions, hormonal reactions, and the like. And then within that primary category, herbs are then subcategorized. So they are categorized based on their kind of unique and specific actions and areas of influence. So for example, you can have an herb that moves chi to help with digestion, or it moves chi in the muscles to help with pain, or it will move chi in the heart or the lungs for breathing and circulation. Herbs also have kind of an inherent energetic. So herbs can be called warming herbs or cooling herbs or nourishing, strengthening herbs, or more purging and sedating herbs. Now, this is why there is no one herb for something like a headache. As an herbalist, I have to figure out what the nature of the headache is and what's causing the headache, and then select herbs that will counter the nature of that imbalance. So let's just look at a quick example. Let's say you and your friend are both coming to see me for headaches. I will complete your examinations and then decide that, while you're both seeking headache relief, the nature of your headaches are very different. So I would need to find pain-relieving herbs with the proper energetics to treat that type of headache. So for example, let's say your headache is caused from a sinus headache, and I differentiate it as an invasion of wind and heat. So I would use cooling and settling herbs like peppermint, yarrow, and willow bark. And then let's say it's really affecting the front of your head. I could add white angelica. Your friend's headache, however, is more of a migraine type headache from what we call stagnated energy. So I would use herbs that would move that energy kind of out and down. So herbs like blue perum, Szechuan lovage root, and peony. And then let's say it always occurs prior to menstruation. I could add nutgrass rhizome. So obviously this approach to herbalism is very complex because patterns are often very nuanced. But I also believe that this approach to herbalism is as successful as it is because of this complicated approach to it. But again, it also illustrates, why extensive education is so important. So let's switch gears for a second and talk about magical herbalism and what does that mean? So herbal magic is a large component of many earth-based spiritualities such as paganism and Wicca. And it's considered one of the most ancient and practical forms of magical work. And how do you even define magic? Some people in our communities might say that it's just working within natural law to bring about change through the use of energy as not yet defined by science. So in herbal magic specifically, herbs are used in ways that will often kind of go beyond their botanical pharmacology. Those who practice will say that they instead are harnessing the universal force within herbs for ritual work, smudging, spellcraft intentions, and other types of spiritual work. So herbs can be burned like smudge or incense. You see people using sage, right, to clean their spaces or clean their personal energy field. They can be put into sachets and bottles and kept on altars or hung or kept in pockets. Dream pillows are an example of this type of herbal spellcraft. They can be combined with candles for types of candle magic. They can be mixed in with water bowls for divination. We see M do this, both in the book and in the show. They can be mixed with salt or oil for bathing or anointing, or they can be kept in their natural state, either as potted plants or in a garden. And the idea is that the energy of the herb is emitted around, influencing the space, kind of like Sarah's garden. Herbs are sometimes used internally for magical use. There is an issue of safety. So most culinary herbs, sage, parsley, rosemary, cinnamon, ginger, those are mostly safe. But if you're going to start using herbs topically or ingesting them, again, please have a clinical herbalist look them over with you just to assess for safety. And obviously the practice of magical herbalism has a very informal training, so it's best just used for personal spiritual development. So medicine and magic, what is the difference and how are they alike? As a scientific pagan, which I call myself, I've been asking myself this question for over a decade. I've really come to think of them as kind of opposite sides of the same coin, seeing as the magical nature of an herb can often be linked to its medicinal nature. A really good example here is the use of sage. So in medicine, we use sage as an antiseptic. It's fabulous for sore throats. But in magic, it's used to kind of cleanse or smudge away negative energy. But both approaches here are using sage as some kind of cleanser. Alternatively, you can also think of herbal medicine and herbal magic as having a kind of Venn diagram relationship where there are shared traits with key distinctions. A really good example here is hops flowers. Hops flowers are used to promote sleep in both medicine and magic. However, the additional magic of hops will say that it banishes hexes and nightmares, while the additional medicine of hops will say it helps with indigestion. To add on another fun layer is that we know that going to bed on a full stomach can sometimes plague somebody with nightmares and restless sleep. So perhaps our ancestors thought that indigestion insomnia was a hex. So they would take it before bed to keep the boogeyman away. But maybe the boogeyman is just undigested food. So all in all, I'm not sure if there's a singular answer that will unify or distinguish medicine and magic, but it is something fun to ponder. So let's get into just a quick kind of history of herbalism. I think of it as a really eclectic tapestry, and it's woven in with the history of medicine, the history of food, the history of religion, and really culture itself. In short, we can summarize the history of herbalism as this. And I think the humor kind of speaks for itself. Medicine really began with herbs, and then we have evolved with science and technology. But now we're kind of seeing a resurgence of herbs again. And hopefully, I really hope we get to a place where conventional medicine and herbs are really used together harmoniously. But what do we know specifically? We know that herbs have been around since the genesis of life, even before humans, seeing as a lot of our primate ancestors and relatives will use plants to combat food poisoning. In the 3H period, we saw the first written evidence of herbalism in cultures all around the world. The classical period, we see the rise of herbalism and the origins of conventional medicine with people like Hippocrates and Galen. This is actually the time that we discovered ancient aspirin, which is salicylic acid, located in white willow bark. And then the Middle Ages, we really saw a big boom in herbalism with local apothecaries and healers like Nicholas Culpeper. Women were denoted as healers and midwives, and men were denoted as physicians, which is a subject I am going to touch on in a moment. This is also the time that the Benedictine monks were translating ancient Greco-Roman and Arabic herbal texts, and they were importing herbs from all around the world for study and cultivation. And then in the 19th century, we see the genesis of germ theory, and this gives rise to conventional medicine, which is great, but unfortunately did mean abandoning a lot of herbalism. Like I said, though, today we're kind of seeing a resurgence in herbalism again. It's finally becoming organized and researched as an adjunctive therapy to conventional medicine, which for me is very, very exciting. So we have to take a moment and talk a little bit about some gender bias in herbalism, because it is noteworthy that we really only know the names of prominent male healers and herbalists in history. Yet from what we know about the history of human culture, it's that women were the original stewards of herbalism. They were the primary gatherers and the primary healers. This was considered their sacred duty, and their knowledge and wisdom was passed down their feminine line. And as we evolved, it was still women who tended to the family herbal gardens. They would cultivate remedies for typical ailments. And then when a family member became very ill, they would send for the local healer, who was usually a midwife. The male physician was really only available to people in positions of privilege, and yet he still relied on many wise women herbal remedies. So if we know anything about history, it's that it's shown us that the patriarchy is and always has been uncomfortable with the feminine possessing powerful knowledge. With the continued evolution of our patriarchal society, colonial supremacy, religious zealotry, women have always had to walk a really delicate line. Many spirited women, the estimates I've seen are around 50,000, were branded as witches, imprisoned, tortured, and executed. And that number is just what history dares admit. We have no idea how many multicultural wise woman herbal textbooks were destroyed. And to me, it's kind of a crime that so much of written history of wise woman herbalism has been lost. And the remaining written history of herbalism is really limited to male authors. So here's another question to ponder. Was women's herbalism just called magic to give society an excuse to brand us as witches and co-opt our knowledge? But why are we seeing a resurgence now? First, we can't deny that humanity is at a really pivotal point right now. Healthcare and technology have come a really long way, but the systems themselves are kind of failing. And at the same time, we're seeing a return in feminine power. Women are re-embracing these wild and wise ways of being, and these dominant kind of patriarchal systems are beginning to collapse, which is why the world is maybe in a little bit of chaos right now. As the masculine and feminine are coming more into balance, we're moving away from these, duality and binary ways of thinking and moving more into fluidity and unity. And lastly, we cannot deny that within each of us, there is a genuine subconscious draw to the old ways, to knowledge that has been obscured and oppressed. Some might even say that our cells hold this ancestral memory and it's calling to us now more loudly than ever. Our challenge now is to learn how to integrate this ancient wisdom into our modern environment. All right, so what you came for, who's ready to get into All Souls herbs? So perhaps one of the main reasons that I really love these books so much is that it shows us there is a bridge between science and magic. And in my experience, herbs are a key part of that bridge. As Albert Einstein says, the most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of true art and true science. Whoever does not know it and can no longer wonder and no longer marvel is as good as dead, and his eyes are dimmed. We have to continue to wonder about the mysterious, to explore it and embrace it. The first thing that we learn about herbs and All Souls is that our primary healers, Marthe and Sarah, have still rooms. And a still room, which is short for a distillery room, is just a clean room for storing herbs or soaps and liniments and other kind of healing or cleaning items. Still rooms have always been the women's domain. Again, we are the stewards of herbalism. The organization of herbs in a still room is highly personal. As Diana says, there may be some kind of witchy personalization that governs Sarah's organization, and I can attest to that. We do organize herbs mostly by their functional category, and then after that, there really is kind of a witchy personalization to it, where I'm at a point where I don't even really have to look at the herbs anymore. I just know where to grab. So there is maybe a little bit of magic in that. The first major herbal remedy we come across in the All Souls is Marthe's tea, which I know there's always been lots of discussions about. We find out it's meant to be a contraceptive, so let's dive into how it might have worked. But first, I just need to gently state that with regards to this tea, it's really important to remember context. It's a very old remedy used by magical creatures. The ingredients are mostly emmenagogues, which I will dive into in a moment. So this tea likely wouldn't have prevented conception. It's likely just going to make pregnancies unviable by either preventing implantation or bringing about an early menstruation. So drinking this for contraception can pose a high risk of really severe complications, and I don't recommend it for human consumption. Of course, as a clinician and as a female, I'm all for body autonomy. I appreciate women's growing need for non-hormonal contraception. I just really don't believe that herbal medicine can be safely used this way. So encourage you to talk to your healthcare provider about it. Let's get into these herbs. So our first triad includes rue, tansy, Queen Anne's lace seeds, and these are all very strong emmenagogues. So emmenagogues are herbs that basically bring about menstruation by invigorating blood flow in the womb and stimulating the endometrium to shed. Therefore, they may prevent implantation, or they may simply kind of bring about an early miscarriage before the woman even knows she's pregnant. All three of these herbs are pretty volatile and toxic, so I actually don't use them in my personal practice. The second triad are kind of more milder emmenagogues, and they include angelica, pennyroyal, and mugwort. Angelica, again, mild emmenagogue, but it's also considered to be very nourishing for the blood. There's also some research that indicates that angelica root may block progesterone, thereby preventing implantation. It also has some really nice anti-inflammatory qualities, so I actually use angelica quite often for a variety of conditions. Then there's pennyroyal, also a mild emmenagogue that may also stimulate uterine contractions. This is an example of what we call like moving energy or moving chi. And then mugwort, which is one of my favorite herbs. Also a very mild emmenagogue. It's very warming. So we traditionally use it for joint pain or menstrual pain, excessive menstrual bleeding, and infertility. So it's actually really interesting to me that the mugwort is in this formula, because while it does promote blood flow, it actually prevents excessive blood loss. So with all of these really strong emmenagogues in this formula, there could be a risk of hemorrhage. So it's kind of noteworthy that the creator of this formula thought to balance it by including an ingredient that may prevent hemorrhaging. And then our third triad is our antiseptic group, and includes sage, feverfew, and parsley, which is also significant kind of when it comes to the overall balance of the formula. So these herbs are there to kind of protect the body from infection, which could be important when encouraging menstruation or during an early miscarriage. Sage also can stimulate uterine contractions. It also may be estrogen promoting, which means it in turn would lower progesterone and make a pregnancy unviable. I personally like to use sage as a throat gargle with salt. It's great for that. And then feverfew may also stimulate some uterine contractions, but I primarily use feverfew for various types of respiratory infections. And then our final triad is the harmonizer or guiding group, and it includes juniper root, rosemary, and ginger. So harmonizers, they don't really do or force anything to happen in the body. They're just there to kind of harmonize the herbs and direct the formula to its desired area of influence. This is likely why the formula calls for juniper root instead of juniper berries, because the root would guide the actions of the formula to the body's root, which is the womb. And then rosemary and ginger, both very mild herbs that are just kind of there to harmonize the formula, prevent toxicity, and make it a little bit more digestible. Many of my formulas will include ginger as kind of a warming and harmonizing agent. So in summary, as we know, this formula likely designed to kind of make the womb just an uninhabitable place for pregnancy. If conception did occur, the herbs would make it unviable, ultimately bringing about menstruation. Other herbs are there for kind of more protecting and balancing purposes, such as preventing too much blood loss or preventing infection, and then guiding and harmonizing effects. Again, as previously stated, strong emmenagogues for contraception is very high risk and not recommended. So this is one of my favorite slides to talk about. We've covered the medicinal side of Marthe's tea. It would really behoove us not to ponder the magical side of the tea. After all, Marthe's history is shrouded in a lot of mystery, and I always wonder about a potential witchy heritage in Marthe. So these are the magical properties of these herbs. And the first time I really stepped back to look at these, it honestly kind of took me aback, because you'll see the key themes here are protection and awakening one's magic. So I couldn't help but wonder if Marthe was also trying to give Diana this tea to protect her from harm, protect her from the congregation, maybe even help things with her and Matthew. Really makes me wonder if Marthe was actually trying to help Diana awaken her magic. I won't lie, the pennyroyal bringing about peace in a marriage and rosemary creating feminine dominion over the household totally made me laugh. I think that's absolutely hilarious. So I'd really love to know how Deb came across or created this formula, considering the medicinal and magical implications are just so spot on for the story. All right, so let's move on to the kind of fun little headache coddle that we see in Shadow of Night. So when Diana happens upon it, she finds the instructions to set your water to boil, to beat 2 egg yolks, add some white wine, then beat some more. And then when the water boils, you set it to cool, and you add the wine and the egg. And then you stir it as it begins to boil again, adding saffron and honey. So egg yolks are used in herbalism for their blood nourishing properties. And the wine could be used as kind of a guiding herb, again, to kind of guide the formula to influence the head, since alcohol has very kind of lifting properties. Saffron is actually a very commonly herb used for pain, poor circulation, and inflammation. And then honey is just a really nice harmonizer. So it's actually, to me, this formula may actually be kind of effective for a very specific type of headache that I would differentiate as a headache due to kind of poor circulation from some kind of like deficiency of blood, or like a premenstrual migraine. So I actually put it to the test and tried it when I was having a premenstrual migraine a few months ago. I made it right when I started seeing an aura. All I can say is that I never had a full-blown migraine, so there could be something to it, but it's probably not effective for all types of headaches. And then dream pillows, which I know is another favorite. They're a huge standout piece of herbal magic in All Souls as both a protective and sleep-enhancing charm for children. So in magical practice, the dream pillow would be considered what we call a container spell. And a container spell is a spell in which magical properties are contained into a specific item, and then that item will emit its influence in its immediate area. But when I take my herbalist eye to the formula, I actually do see some medicine here that could possibly be absorbed as aroma and could help with sleep, though it would probably be more effective as a tisane. So let's get into these ingredients. So the first we know is moonwort pod, and it is sewn onto the front of the pillow to kind of banish monsters and nightmares. The idea is that the silvery sheen acts as a mirror, reflecting the nightmare back on itself. And then we have agrimony, which magically is used to reverse a jinx or hex or aid in sleep. The medicine of agrimony is that it's known as kind of like a wound healer, so it's really good for mouth ulcers. It's also great for kind of moving energy in the tummy. It's really, really great for different types of colitis. I use it for a lot of ulcerative colitis formulas. And it's also good for like really excessively heavy menstruation, or if you're having menstrual bleeding between cycles, if you're dealing with like fibroids or other types of conditions. And then mugwort, again, is really, really popular herb in magic cultures. So mugwort magically is used to kind of open up the third eye, which is like your intuition. It's also used for smudging and protection. And then medicine, as we know, it helps kind of warm the interior. It gently kind of moves energy and blood. And it's a very healing herb for the womb. And then next we have aniseed, which is used for warding off evil. In the book, it'll say it retains youth, but I'm wondering if it's in this formula just because it's specifically for children. Then we have hops, which we kind of already talked about. It's a great sleep aid. Magically, it's considered an herb that would banish curses or nightmares. And then in medicine, we use it to calm the spirit to help with sleep. It also really helps with indigestion. So it's great in kind of like after dinner teas. And then lastly, valerian root, which in magic is used as a very strong sleep aid. It's also used for protection, consecration, and self-love. And then the medicine, valerian, is a very, very strong sleep aid. And then at the last minute, Diana decides to add 5 beans. This is a purely magical addition. So in a lot of kind of like magical cultures, again, sound is considered to be a very strong cleansing method. The idea is that the sound claps or breaks up negative or stagnant energy. So as we know, Sarah is actually very impressed with Diana's ingredient selections, saying it's almost exactly like an earlier formula, which also had mullein and vervain. So again, mullein is there for probably its protective purposes. In medicine, mullein is a really great herb for expelling kind of phlegm and heat from the lungs. It's great for bronchitis and types of upper respiratory infections. And then vervain, again, helping with kind of sleep and courage and protection for children. And in medicine, vervain is also a really good herb for kind of calming the spirit. It's also really good for throat and chest congestion. So it's actually interesting to me, again, that these two are in this formula because historically it could have been used as an actual sleep charm for children if they were plagued with some kind of respiratory infection, which we know is very common in little kids. Little kids almost always have some kind of sickness or snotty noses, and maybe that illness was thought to be against some kind of hex. All right, so let's jump into times converts. So some of this may seem familiar for you. For those of you that are in the All Souls discussion group, we kind of had this discussion, but I thought it'd be fun, obviously, to present it to everybody. So the first big herbal remedy that we come across in times convert is the little sleep tisane that Marcus gets from Dr. Buckland. Though it's important to remember that it is actually Mrs. Buckland's formula. It is not something that Dr. Buckland created. It is a fantastic sleep remedy. I actually use it all the time. It's generally safe and it's very easy to find as a tincture in various health food stores. But as always, again, talk to an herbalist first because like valerian, for example, It interacts with a lot of medications, like it can't be taken with alcohol, with certain antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, and the like. But hops and skullcapper are very safe to take. And then there's a liniment that Dr. Buckland gives Marcus for his bruises. And while we don't know what's in the liniment, this is my best guess based on some commonly used remedies at that time. And it's likely a very good liniment. It could have ingredients like arnica, comfrey, golden seal, myrrh, bruisewort, cayenne, and then it would need some kind of binder. Usually beeswax or jojoba oil or almond oil were used very commonly back then. If I get around to it, I may try to make this as a salve one day and test it out. Another herb that's mentioned is castor oil, which you can see has multiple benefits. I personally don't recommend using castor oil internally, but I do recommend castor oil packs for period cramps. As long as your periods aren't too heavy, castor oil packs are amazing for managing that type of pain, especially when you can mix it with a little bit of clary sage oil and a heating pad. And then we hear about camphor. Camphor is a substance that's found on the bark of laurel trees. It's often used for pain, congestion, and coughs. We typically only use it topically, and it's the active ingredient that you'll find in things like Vicks and Tiger Balm. However, most of the over-the-counter materials that you find today use synthetic camphor. It's actually hard to find real camphor. And then a little bit later on in the book, we learn about another tisane that Marcus uses for asthma, and it's made of elderflower and fennel. So elderflower is a very, very powerful antiviral. It's one of the herbalist kind of go-to herbs, especially in the upcoming months. Probably by the time you guys are watching this, it's probably cold season. It's a great diaphoretic, so it helps kind of bring about a sweat, which in a lot of herbalist traditions, bringing about a sweat in somebody is actually a way of like venting a pathogen from your body. And it's a great decongestant, so it works by, again, clearing kind of toxic heat from the lungs. Fennel is something that I don't often use for asthma. I actually use it more for reproductive and genitourinary issues. It's great for hernias as a compress, but it's still a very warming and invigorating herb that kind of, depending on how it's combined, could be really helpful for asthma that's really aggravated by cold air, which they actually mention in the book. And Marcus also adds marshmallow flower, which is a fantastic herb for kind of moistening the lungs and alleviating coughs, congestion, and inflammation, especially in the bronchial region. So it definitely makes sense to have that in there. Marcus is also instructed to add nightshade to help ease spasms, which was very commonly used back then, but it's toxic, so we don't use it today. And then at the last minute, Marcus adds mint. Now, mint is one of my favorite herbs. It's so diverse. It can help with so many different melodies. Not only does it help with the flavor, but can also, again, be used to kind of invigorate flow of energy kind of upwards in a venting fashion. So this would be very helpful for kind of like venting and decongesting the lungs. Other really great ingredients that I use for asthma include astragalus or apricot kernels, salvia root, epimedium, and trichosanthus fruit. All right, so that's about all I have for the All Souls herbs. I know there are tons in there, and I would love for you guys to ask me questions about any standout herbs that you have found in the text and kind of ask what they're about. But I thought we could conclude with a little bit on kind of the alchemy that occurs in herbal formulas. One of the first things that we learn in school is that the function of the formula is greater than the sum of the actions of the individual herbs. So when herbs are combined, a kind of synergy happens, which ultimately creates something greater. And this is why, depending on the combination, mint can be used to cure a headache or ease a sore throat or soothe the stomach. It all depends on the alchemy of how it's combined and cooked. There's also a hierarchical structure to creating a balanced formula. So each herb plays a very specific role. You don't just kind of get willy-nilly and start, haphazardly grabbing herbs that would work from specific categories. There really is a method to it. And each herb has a role, and that role kind of elucidates its functions in the formula. So you always have the chief and sovereign herbs. Those are always herbs that you pick right away, and they're going to be providing kind of like the main therapeutic action. And then you have the deputy or minister herbs, and they're usually there to assist the chief. So they have some similar properties, but they also may have kind of a few unique properties as well to kind of help boost the formula. And then you have the assistants, which are there to kind of treat other accompanying symptoms or reduce the toxicity of the formula. And then you have what's called the envoy, and the envoy is there to kind of harmonize the formula overall or direct it to a specific area. So if we recall Marthe's tea, it actually follows the structure really well. We have our chief triad, which were the very strong emmenagogues, the rue, the tansy, and the Queen Anne's lace seed. And then we have the deputy triad of kind of the more gentle emmenagogues, the angelica, the pennyroyal, and the mugwort. And they're also acting to kind of work to block progesterone and prevent hemorrhaging. And then you have the assistant triad of antiseptics, which were there to kind of combat any potential infection. And then our envoy triad to be there for their kind of harmonizing and guiding effects. So I was really impressed with how kind of balanced this formula is, even though we probably shouldn't use it for what it's designed for. And it would behoove me not to leave you with some herbal recipes for yourselves, because everyone wants to learn how to incorporate herbs into their healthcare regimen, which I think is fantastic. So we're going to leave you with some recipes for self-care, for the sniffles, for stress, for some restful sleep, for easier digestion, and then one of my absolute favorite formulas for premenstrual cramps. So these formulas are all kind of generally safe for those with robust health. However, you shouldn't use them, again, without consulting an herbalist if you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, if you have a really significant medical diagnosis, or if you're taking strong pharmaceuticals on a regular basis. If you do have questions about these specific tisanes, just please feel free to email me. I won't charge you. So you can just ask me questions about it, and I'm more than happy to provide a complimentary consult for you, because I would love for you guys to be able to incorporate herbs in a way that's safe for you. So this is one of my absolute favorite formulas for the cold season. It's really great for early sinusitis, fall allergies, other types of upper respiratory tract infections. It really helps to kind of vent pathogenic factors from the body and stimulate a healthy immune response. And it is made with elderflower and elderberry, yarrow, which is another one of my favorite herbs, echinacea and hyssop, and mint and ginger. And to make this, you basically just take about a pinch of each. It'll be about a tablespoon, maybe more. And then you're going to infuse it in boiled water for about 5 to 7 minutes. And then you can add a little spot of honey. So you're going to want to make 2 cups. You want to drink your first cup, and then you're going to take a bath. And then you're going to get out of the tub, get all bundled up again, and then you're going to drink a second cup. And hopefully this will actually bring about a sweat. We call this releasing the exterior. So the idea is that the opening of the pores is venting the virus from your body. So sweat it out. This is a really great formula that, because it's very rooty, is better as a decoction than a tisane, though it can be used as a tisane if you don't have time to make the full decoction. It is a bit more earthy tasting. That's actually what I'm drinking right now. It's made with ashwagandha, eleuthero, rhodiola, holy basil, astragalus, roasted dandelion root, and licorice root. So all of these herbs collectively are considered really strong adaptogens. And an adaptogen herb basically means it helps your body be resilient to stress. So ultimately it reduces their stress response and then increases your relaxation response. So for this one, you don't have to use an herb cooker. You can just use a really good stew pot. You're going to want to put about 9 grams, or just kind of like a small handful of each herb into the pot with about a gallon of water. And then you bring that to a boil and then turn it down and let it simmer for about an hour to an hour and a half. And then you just strain your decoction out and then drink about 8 ounces a day. Again, this one does taste a little bit more earthy and rooty. So a lot of my patients will add things like honey or agave, monk fruit, stevia, or blackstrap molasses. I'm a big fan of adding blackstrap just because of its vitamin profile. It's got a really great, it's a really great source of selenium too. For a lot of people that have a lot of really high stress, their thyroid kind of takes a bit of a hit. So the selenium is really nice for the thyroid. And also, I just really like the taste of blackstrap molasses. Next is the dream tea, which is really great for restless sleep. It's good for insomnia. When you're sleeping, but if you're maybe having really dream disturbed sleep, or you feel really hot at night, or just that feeling of when you wake up in the morning and you just feel like you haven't gotten a good night's rest. A lot of these herbs are very cool in nature, so they kind of calm the spirit by cooling us down and then kind of helping our energy move more freely, while other herbs will kind of help, again, down-regulate that stress response to help us relax. So it is made with chamomile, hops, skullcap, holy basil, passion flower, which can sometimes be hard to find, so it can be left out, lavender, and lemon balm. And just like that first tisane, you're going to use, about a pinch of each, 8 ounces of water, let it infuse for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then add a little spot of honey. So valerian root can technically be added. Again, you have to make sure that it's not interacting with any medications you may be taking. But at the same time, for those of you that have tasted valerian root, you know this, it tastes wretched. Every time I've cooked it, my house smells like a smelly foot after. So it's better to use, if you want to use valerian for sleep, and you've gotten the okay from your physician, it's better just to buy it from the store as a tincture and not stink up your house. And now for some tummy tea, which is really great for kind of easing that typical indigestion, or it's a really great after dinner tea. If you've had some really rich foods, I always drink this after really, really big meals. All of the herbs here are kind of really designed to help move energy in the digestive tract. Its energetics are very neutral, so it can be used for multiple patterns of indigestion. And it is made with peppermint, ginger, rosemary, sage, fennel, orange peel, and licorice root. If you are feeling a little bit restless, if you're worried about kind of having that boogeyman insomnia, you can add a little bit of chamomile or hops flowers to keep him away. And just like always, a pinch of each. You infuse it with 8 ounces of boiling water, and then add a little sweetener if you want. As long as it's not white table sugar, you're good. And then lastly, for all my ladies out there, moon tea. This is one of my favorite remedies for PMS and period cramps. It's very floral and very soothing, works to promote healthy circulation, also helps nourish the blood, alleviate pain, and reduce muscle spasms. And I make it with safflower, osmanthus flower, rosebuds, rose hips, red raspberry leaf, and nettles. Again, though, if you are trying to get pregnant, be a little bit cautious with this. Run it by with an herbalist first, or if you are pregnant or breastfeeding, it's best not to use this formula. All right. And there's all of my references, but that is all I have for today. I really hope you found this information educational and magical. So I leave you with some things to ponder, what is herbalism? Is it medicine or magic? Are those the same? All right, so I will close out our screen sharing here and we will get to questions. I see lots of questions in the chat. Awesome. Okay. So Laura asks, herbs are not regulated medicinal, so I'm always a tad nervous to buy them. Can you recommend a trusted place to buy them, or do I sell them? So yes, I do sell herbs. I'll mail them all around the world, just kind of have to work out shipping. But you can also buy herbs, a really good company. There's 2 that I use online. One is called Mountain Rose Medicinals, or Star West Botanicals. They are very high quality. They go through extensive cleaning and inspection, and sometimes you can get them on wholesale from there too, which is great. Okay. When someone starts working out at the gym, it makes many visits and time for any physical changes to happen and show. Is there a similar waiting period for herbs, and does it differ depending on the user? Great question. So for the most part, herbs are kind of like any healing process. It does take time to kind of build and collect in your system. However, how I kind of work with herbs is I usually prepare about 12 days at a time. That way, after that 12-day period, we can kind of check in and see if it's the right formula or not. Usually after 12 days, you should start noticing something. Most of the time it's feeling, maybe I've had more good days than bad days, or, I did finally have a few nights of sleep, or maybe, my period wasn't as bad this time around. So it's kind of dependent based on the person too, their constitution. We always say it took you 6 months to get here. It's not going to go away right away. But I do expect it to show benefits pretty quickly. All right. So Karen asks, is it okay to prepare various recipes for different things and then consume them? So most of the herbs will stay fresh if you keep them refrigerated for about a month. So I usually do have a few. Like my fridge is a disaster. My poor husband, of course, my husband's he co-owns our business with me too, so he's also an herbalist. So he's more or less used to having 5 or 6 giant mason jars full of brown liquid in the fridge. But after about a month, yeah, you're going to want to throw them out. So don't prepare too much in advance. And then Laura asked, not a silly question at all. I love lavender. Um, so it's used in many cultures for calming and relaxation. Do I have thoughts on why so many people like it? I think lavender. It's a very easy, commonly grown herb. It's easy to cultivate. It's easy to grow, and it's also very gentle. There are very few contraindications for lavender, so pretty much everybody can use it. The only thing that you're not supposed to do is if you have lavender essential oils. That is topical only. You're not supposed to ingest lavender essential oil. If you want to eat lavender, it needs to be in its raw form, either brewed into like a herbal tea or like culinary. You can cook it. I love lavender syrup, actually. I put lavender syrup in my coffee every morning to make myself a little lavender latte. It's delicious. And then you're asked if Marthe has been using the same team for hundreds of years, are most herb uses unchanged? Yes. Most of the herbs, and this is actually what's so fascinating, again, kind of about that ancient wisdom, is that, we are researching herbs more now, and we're starting to understand, we call it their phytopharmacy, and really starting to understand what they're doing. And the more that we learn about them, the more that we realize these ancient indications were spot on from the beginning, but they didn't have the technology to know that. So how they knew that these herbs did these different things is actually really fascinating to me. Every once in a while, we find out that an herb has a new function, especially because we've always had stress as humans, but as we evolve and become more smarter and more social and more industrialized, like stress is a huger issue. So a lot of herbs that are now defined as we call like adaptogen herbs, those are kind of newer functions and newer herbs that we're using. Let's see here. Can you prepare herbs like in an atomizer? Okay, so I have a little clarification here. So can you brew herbs in heated water and then stick a towel over your head so you can breathe it in that way? Yes, you can absolutely do that. It's more for herbs that you're using for respiratory benefits, like that Sniffle Tea. You can definitely infuse as an aroma. You can also put it in a little muslin bag and put it in your bathtub and kind of take a bath with it. That will also help. Some of the tummy herbs, maybe not as much. The stress herbs probably would be okay to kind of breathing the steam in as well, because it's still being absorbed into your lungs, which then eventually makes its way into your bloodstream. Okay, yes, we're living in a very stressful time. Is there anything that I can recommend for all of us, even though we should look for personalized remedies? So stress, any of those like adaptogen type herbs that you see, there are very, very, very few contraindications for those. So you can usually find holy basil tea in most tea shops. I love holy basil. It's very gentle. It's very relaxing. Astragalus too is also, there's pretty much no contraindications for astragalus. It's very good, especially if you get stressed out and you have some like breathing issues that go along with the stress. Ashwagandha is also like a pretty safe herb. It can lower your blood pressure a little bit. So if you have really low blood pressure, I probably wouldn't use ashwagandha. Eleuthero is another really great kind of adaptogenic herb, especially if you're having issues with feeling really tired in the morning. It kind of gives you like a little kickstart. And also just mindfulness exercises. I know someone is doing a yoga session for the con this year, so I'm definitely going to participate in that. Yoga is great for mind-body wellness. Breathing exercises, and just taking time to be mindful about how you're eating and drinking anything, when you're sitting down making the meal, about the meal, and enjoying, pulling a Deb and getting really into all the flavors and scents and sensations, and just having a mindful experience with your cup of coffee in the morning or your glass of wine at night, which I will be having in a little bit. Okay. What do I think of the use of herbs within magic? Um, like the witches' brooms. Uh, I am not sure about that. I'll have to get back to you on that one. I actually, it's really interesting you bring up brooms though. So I'm part of like a little pagan group in Louisville, and we actually are having a craft festival through Zoom where we're all going to get together and make our own besoms. So I'll probably have more information on that after that meeting. Um, how do poultices work on your body? So there's lots of different ways that you can introduce a substance into your body. When you ingest it, it goes into your digestive tract, where then it gets metabolized, it gets absorbed by your small intestine, and then gets distributed into your blood. When you're putting things on the body, like a poultice, for example, your body will actually still absorb some of the herbal properties directly into the bloodstream through your skin. So that's kind of how poultices will work. Depending on, there's a little bit less we call bioavailability with poultices. So, I mean, the best way to get anything into your body is to inject it straight into your veins, but we don't do that just because it's painful and not really safe to do yourself. Yeah, so poultices, they just kind of get absorbed by the body and then brought into the bloodstream that way. Any thoughts about matcha? I've got a big canister of matcha. It's one of my favorite morning teas. I really like matcha green tea. I'm still a coffee girl too. Like I drink everything. What's nice about tea though is that it doesn't burn your energy as fast as coffee does. Excuse me. It's a little bit more moistening and relaxing. So really, really like matcha. Yeah, I have it a lot. I actually mix it in just the powder with my smoothies in the morning sometimes. All right. I think I am caught up. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. It was so lovely to share this time with you. I'm going to put my email in the chat. And I also have it on the slide, so you guys will have access to the slide. But yeah, you can reach out to me anytime. My email is Andrea and it's ACU, the word balance, ky.com. I'd love to hear from anybody watching the recording who has some questions or thoughts or just wants some feedback on herbs in general. And all my love to you guys. And I can't wait to see you in person whenever we can all do this again.